Great morning, great morning. Friends, Facebook doesn't like that. Welcome to the broadcast this morning. I'm Andrea M. Stuckey, your divorce liberator, your favorite divorce coach, coming to you this morning to talk about why do friendships change after divorce. Hey, Shireen, great to see you. Why do friendships change after divorce? So we're going to give people a moment to come in. I'm going to see if I can do a little quick cut of this song without Facebook shutting me down. Let's see. Y'all remember that song? Anyway, I hope that you guys are doing well. Come on in, share the broadcast out, thumbs up, heart it up. I'm talking about a really serious subject this morning, even though I want to bring light to it. But I want to talk about why do friendships change during and after divorce. So if you are live on the broadcast, say hello so that I can know that you're here, and thumbs hearted up and share the broadcast out. So again, if you're joining me for the very first time, I'm Andrea M. Stuckey, the founder of Divorce Women Unite, Live Life Love Coaching, author and speaker. I'm also a two-time divorcee, so I've been down this journey of where many of you may be traveling right now or have gone through as well, the journey of divorce. Shireen, if you could give me a thumbs up and tell me if you can hear me okay. I'm in my car. Okay, are you there? Is the connection good? It's hard for me to tell. Hey, Jasmine. Hey, you can hear me okay? Give me a thumbs up if you guys can hear me. Great. This is a good one. Yes, absolutely. Why do friendships change after divorce? And so let me just go ahead and just kick it off. I've already done my introduction. And again, welcome you guys as you're watching by replay. Make sure you share this broadcast out. Make sure you invite some of your followers and friends here in the community. Because this is a very interesting topic, and a lot of times people don't understand what the transition of friendships look like when you go through a divorce or are going through a divorce. Very, very important topic. So let me just jump right into it. I do want to start off with a quote or scripture. I have both, but I'm going to start off with a scripture that comes from the book of Proverbs, chapter 18, verse 24. And it says, "A man that has friends must show himself friendly." A man that has friends must show himself friendly. And I used to tell my children this all the time when they were younger, that in order to have good friends, you have to be a good friend, right? And so we're talking about friendships on today. Friendships are a beautiful thing. And if you've ever experienced a really great friend who loves and supports you, it is really an amazing experience. And actually what spurred this particular topic, and I've talked about it before on platforms, but most recently last week, a client of mine were talking about this particular subject. So I thought it would be great to come and talk to it where I have an opportunity to elaborate a little bit more and share some of my experiences between both of my divorces, right? And the experiences that I have had along that journey. Traveling on a life with a friend, it's just amazing, And we have, in life, we have a lot of acquaintances, and we know that friendships and acquaintances are very different. And I think that sometimes it's easy for us to kind of put them in the same category, which they are not the same, right? They are not the same. And so oftentimes acquaintanceships are very superficial commonalities, and they may be fleeting relationships, where friendships go a little more deeper. You experience a lot more together, and there's a greater level of love and support. Great morning, Loretta. Great to have you here on the broadcast. Great to see you. Thank you so much for joining the broadcast. So here is the thing. When we talk about friendships during and after divorce, we have to understand really the nature of friendships themselves, right? Hey, Cynthia, so wonderful to see you this morning. So when we talk about friendships, let's look at how friendships in general are created, and then we'll look at them in the context of, relationships and the process of divorce, right? So generally, when you think about friendships, how we meet people and potentially developed, whether develop that relationship, whether it turns into a friendship or a acquaintanceship, right? There's usually some type of commonality that brings us together, right? And so oftentimes, for those of you who have children, sometimes you may have met other women, right? When your children have had common experiences, activities, maybe go to the same school, maybe at church or whatever, and that draws you together, right? Initially, and then perhaps you understand and can relate to each other on a greater level that, hey, we have a lot more in common, we have a lot of similar interests, and our kids are in these same activities, and so let's get together for coffee, whatever that is, and you develop that friendship, right? But there's something that's common that brings you together. Let's look at the workplace, for example. A lot of times, not a lot of times, but when you have a full-time job, you spend a lot of time in that office or that environment with a group of people. So depending on, the setup of your environment and your friendship, right? At your workplace, you may be in close proximity. You might be literally right next to someone. You have to work on teams depending on the environment. But when you spend that amount of time with someone, you get to know them very well. And the same thing may happen. You may understand that or recognize, if you will, that you guys have a lot of things in common. Maybe your children are the same age, you have the same outside interests, and so you develop this acquaintanceship, right? Well, the same thing happens in marriages. So what may happen is your friends become your husband's friends. His friends become your friends. So your couple, or you may have a girlfriend who has a husband and you guys get together. He may have a guy friend and his wife and you guys get together. And so over time, you develop these relationships, right? And perhaps you get together for kids, maybe you even have kids that are the same age, and you get together and you have and create these friendships and these acquaintanceships, right? And so let's fast forward a little bit, because I have a story I want to tell you about myself as well. So if you're here, let me know that you're still here. Let me see you put a thumbs up. Let me see you tap some hearts or thumbs up so I know that you're there. And also lets me know that this connection is working since I'm outside, right? So here's the thing. Oftentimes when you're going through a separation or a divorce, hey Chanel, great to see you. When you're going through a separation or divorce, you may notice that there's some shifts and changes in your friendships. There's some maybe avoidance from some friends. Maybe people aren't answering your calls, or maybe you're just recognizing this shift and you can't understand that you've been friends with someone for 5, 10, 20 years, that your in-laws, who you develop friendships with your in-laws too, right? You may, your spouse's sister or sisters or husband's sisters or wives or whatever, you develop these relationships. And so what you may notice is that during a divorce or after, something is shifting and you can't quite put your finger on it. Jasmine says, my husband's friends are actually family of mine, but due to being estranged from them, they are clearly loyal to him. Absolutely. And I'm going to talk about that. Right. And it's just really, let me just preface it by saying it's the human factor. Right? That's a term that I like to use because we're all human. So I don't want to get off track. So here's the thing. Let's look at friendships. What you have to ask yourself when you notice that there's a shift and a change in the relationships of your friends, I want you to think about how you met. Right? How did you meet? I know another former client, we had this conversation a couple of years ago. She was involved with some women in her community. They would get together for wine and do a lot of things. But what would happen is when her and her husband began to go to a divorce, she didn't feel the warmth in that group anymore. Right? She recognized that there was a change and shift in the dynamic, and they didn't do anything outwardly to hurt her, but she recognized that, right? That there was a change. And so listen, now you have married women who are talking about their spouses and talking about their kids. And so now when you no longer have a spouse, or you're having a challenge with your spouse, or you're going through a divorce, those conversations change, don't they? Right? Or you may not feel comfortable listening to them when you're in the middle of your hurt. Or they may not be comfortable listening to you talk about what you're going through. Maybe they're on the verge of a divorce. There are a lot of different dynamics, but I challenge you, number one, is to think about what common factor drew you together. And was your spouse, current spouse, ex-husband, whatever, was he a part of the puzzle, if you will? Right? Because that can definitely help you. And when those commonalities shift, oftentimes the nature of the friendship shifts. And the reality is it's not wrong. It's not anybody's fault. It's just that's how we build relationships. Right? And so oftentimes if you have a friendship, and I know I have a friendship right now, my very best friend, we've been friends for, over 20 years. We met through our ex-husbands, however you want to shift it, right? But we developed a friendship outside of them. And so because we built it outside of them, that developed the relationship between her and I. Right? So it wasn't always a couples thing, if you will, to develop the friendship. So when I had my challenges in my marriage, it didn't harm our friendship. Right? She showed more love, compassion, and support than ever. Okay, so I just want to share that piece. Now, on the flip side, let me share a story with you. And this is something that my client and I were talking about. One of the things you may notice that in your friendships they change is that when you're going through a divorce, when you're going through a separation, and you have that close friend, you may confide a lot in them, right? Are you guys still on board? Let me see some thumbs up. Let me know that you're here. Drop an emoji, drop something so I know that you're here. You may confide in them a lot, right? Because after all, they're a very good friend. And so you may be sharing some of your experiences, sharing your hurts, sharing your pains, right? And they become a comfort level for you. They may even give you advice. They may even pray for you, right? Now, a lot of times these dynamics may be happening even when there's not a divorce going on, but that's a different story for a different day in terms of healthy and unhealthy friendships, right? But oftentimes what happens is they are in a place of helping you and saving you, if you will, right? Maybe they're even sort of getting a heroic feeling, right? That you're coming to them and that you need them. Right? They feel good that you need them. But oftentimes what happens is when you begin to heal, when you begin to shift, when you begin to get your footing back, when you begin to get your life back, and now your conversation is changing. Now you don't need to be fixed. Maybe you don't need them in that way anymore. The nature of the relationship can change. So let me share my experience. And this happened probably 6 years ago. So I'm about 10 years out of my second marriage. And a former friend now, unfortunately, we have been friends since my early 20s. So we had an over 20-year relationship. And we had gone through births, right, of kids. 2 of our children are the same age, our older children. I had already gone through one divorce that she went through with me. She had different trials and tribulations in her life, and we were just always there for one another. And one of the things that I had loved about that friendship is that we could just totally be who we are, as different as we were, but we supported one another, right? And we were very, we just had a great relationship. We could talk about our opinions and those type of things and keep it moving. But here's what happened, unfortunately. Sorry, not sorry, right? What happened? So I was confiding in this particular friend for quite some time. You guys know my story. I left my second husband, started really at rock bottom. I wasn't even working. And she was just a great sense of support, as she had always been. But over time, right, when I started working and getting my kids back in, school, and 2 years out of my second divorce, I started dating. And it was her who encouraged me to get online and start meeting people, right? And so the person that I met, I actually didn't meet online, but I had some common friends who introduced me to this gentleman. It was the first person I really dated after my divorce, right? And so at first she was very encouraging. But now, how many of you know that all the conversations that her and I had, now they're fewer in between, because now I had to divide my time up with the person I was dating, along with I think my daughter was at college, kid in, grammar school, elementary school, working a full-time job. I had a second job, if you will. I hadn't started a business yet. But so the nature of our relationship was beginning to change. Okay. And so unfortunately, and I'm just going to make a long story short, there was a day we had a conversation, and apparently she was a little jealous of the time that I was spending with the guy I was dating at the time. And she was upset with me, and she said some things that I had confided in her, and she threw them in my face in the conversation, which how many of you know is a deal breaker? If you're there and you have boundaries in your friendships and you know how to set deal breakers in your relationships and friendships, it was a total deal breaker. Right? And so what happened was I was able to see what was under the surface. So a lot of times you just have to be really careful. It doesn't mean that all of your experiences will be like my experience, but this was really, really bad. Like what she said was really, really bad and was very, very hurtful. And so I had to make a decision at that point. And like I said, this is probably about 6 years ago, that this friendship had to end. Now, when I talk about friendships, and I'm going to get back to specifically the divorce piece of it, but I want you to understand something, is that when people come into, when people come into your life, I have found over this, century of living, that people come into your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. Right? And I'm sure you've heard that before, but I have found it to be very, very true. And so sometimes it is the season to let go. Right? That we don't have to force a relationship, that when it becomes uncomfortable, and we're going to have challenges in friendships just like we do in relationships, right? But when it becomes hard, when it becomes difficult, when it becomes where you're trying to fit it together, the season just may be over, and it's okay, right? It's okay. But I want you to think about the really common thread initially. What drew you together? What kept the friendship together? And now that you're in a different season, do those things remain in the same space, if you will, to keep the friendship together? And sometimes the friendship has simply expired. You have learned what you needed to learn. You have accomplished, if you will, what you needed to accomplish. There was a mutualism you gave. And that's what friendships and relationships are about, right? There's a giving and a taking, if you will. And sometimes they just expire. Right? So I want you to understand, think it not strange, that as you begin to heal, especially you guys, as you're learning more about yourself, as you're growing and developing in your personal life, as you're developing your self-love, as you're beginning to set boundaries, which you should be doing, right? As you're beginning to, go after goals and dreams and aspirations that you have for your life, that may not sit well with everyone. They may look at you and say, you've changed. And guess what I say? Don your wings and say, you're right. I have. I have. And I'm going to don these new wings, fresh out of the cocoon, with pride. And I'm planning to fly. So think it not strange, right? And so oftentimes, there's so many dynamics to these things. And sometimes what happens is, you may have friends who they are in bondage, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's in their job, whether it's in just their life in general. And so as you're growing, right? Because if you're in this community, you're desiring more. You want more for your life. Right? Whatever area that is, it doesn't necessarily mean in a romantic relationship, right? But you want to heal some things. You want to grow, right? And so as you're beginning to grow, there may be a little envy from the outsiders. There may be a little jealousy from the outsiders, because it takes courage to change. And everyone is in a different season and space. Right. And so there was a season in my life that I didn't have the courage to change. I didn't have the courage to speak up in my marriage. I didn't have the courage to set boundaries. Right. I didn't have the courage to put myself first and give from a full cup instead of an empty cup. I didn't have those things. Right. So you have to accept people where they are. And it doesn't mean it has to be an ugly, angry exchange. You just have to be in a position to look at it for what it is. Right? And understand, as hurtful as it may be. Let me tell you, I did not leave that 20-year friendship without hurt, but I do have boundaries. I do have deal breakers in my life with friends, families, and romantic relationship. There are deal breakers because I love myself. And I'm not going to allow people to treat me any old kind of way. I'm not going to put you in a place where I confide in you, but you betray me, and then I'm going to accept that. Absolutely not. Hey, Chastity, great to see you. Right? Absolutely not. I do not have to accept betrayal. Right? And I can understand that this season has expired. And so you may go through that along the journey of divorce. And let me tell you, as you're rebuilding, as you're changing, as you're shifting, the commonality that you found with your other friends is going to change. Right? That commonality may no longer exist. And that's why I encourage you to branch out into the areas that are now new to you, the interests that are now new to you. Make new acquaintances. Friendships have to be built, right? Everyone that you meet is not going to be a lifelong friend. But put yourself in spaces with people who now have a more common thread, whether it has to do with your children, whether it has to do with being a divorced woman or a single mother or an empty nester, right? Or someone who wants to write a book, or someone who's in business, or someone who wants to start their own business, or someone who's on a health and wellness journey, someone who's on a personal development journey. Well, you want to surround yourself with people that you have common interests with. Does that make sense? Because that's usually what the nature of friendships are. Now, you grow and develop, and some grow faster and all of that. But the key is love and support. And so when people are beginning not to show you the love and support, which is the foundation of friendships, you have to begin to really evaluate the positioning of the friendship. You know, is this for a reason? Has this friendship been for a season? Or is it really for a lifetime? And so sometimes we're holding on because we feel obligated. Sometimes we're holding on because we feel we're very loyal, right? But this season may have expired.